Well, you probably don't remember it because you weren't born when it came out, but it's called Ghost Riders on PBS. I love that show growing up.
What
That's
was
one
it
of my
about?
shows. One of the shows I just loved watching.
Well,
And it was cool because it was in New York, and there was like inner city kids from different backgrounds, and they were solving mysteries. Ghost Rider basically helped them discover clues, this or kind of gave them clues to help resolve mysteries. So
I see. Maybe it was like the early mid 90s, but it sounds very much like Gossip Girl, but
mm,
more mystery.
more mystery, more kid based, and funner, cooler.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to an episode of The Box Cutter, where we take apart an episode of Disney's Out of the Box and see if it still holds up. My name is Daniel, and my co-host for today is my good old brother-in-law, as well as child advocate. So, hi, Juan. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on. I was a little surprised to get the request because I have no knowledge about out of the box. I have no prior knowledge, obviously, but um, it doesn't require everyone to have prior knowledge. You can just watch an episode and really see what it's about, what it reminds you of, and just how you can apply it to your life now.
As my listeners should know, I invite friends and family and even other people within the podcasting community to share with me the experience of watching such an underrated yet fabulous show that teaches kids about practicing creativity and imagination. And yeah, you don't need to have any nostalgia for it. You don't need to have seen it growing up. That's what makes the discussion so diverse and lively, is that there are so many different perspectives, and I think that's something that Tony and Vivian would want, is differing perspectives to keep things interesting and lively. So, how are you and my good old brother keeping safe during all this time of caution?
We've been adapting pretty well. I'm gonna go back to work soon, so I'm sad about that because I won't be sleeping in, until 8 like I'm used to now. I'll have to get up earlier to get onto court. But
So, you work as a child advocate in children's court. What does that entail? Like, what kind of court cases do you observe or go to court for?
so I'm minors counsel, court appointed attorney. So I specifically practice dependency law, which is it involves children who have either been subject to abuse or neglect by a parent or guardian. So I'm there to be their voice in court, ensure that they're safe, ensure that they have the services they need to thrive. So that is my role as minors counsel and as the child's attorney. One of the things that I thought of as I was watching the show is like, wow, these kids are so innocent. They are children. They are expressing themselves as children, and they're using their imagination and creativity. So I wonder, do Vivian and Tony get paid for what they do? What do you think? Because they're ultimately caring for children, um, whose parents are maybe working, whose parents maybe are whatever, right? They may be doing their own thing, but these are the caretakers, right? They're looking after these kids for.
And you can see that they're all different colors and shades and different backgrounds, black, Asian, Jewish, white, Italian, Hispanic. They're not just all one group of children. They're all sorts of different children that represent all sorts of lifestyles and backgrounds. So since we're talking about Tony and Vivian and the kids, let's go ahead and introduce the episode that we watched, which is High Flyers. So the episode starts with Vivian in the clubhouse, and she sees the viewer, and she gives us a preview of what the craft is for that day. And it's parachutes. She shows off her parachute, and she shows us that she was making purple paper people to write inside of the parachute.
The PPPs.
Yes, the PPPs. So while she's showing us her paper parachute, a toy plane flies through the window and almost hits her in the head, and she surprisingly takes it well. She's not like, looking out the window about to yell at somebody. She's just like, well, where'd that come from?
I was surprised that her windows had no glass or no screen. They just that plane just flew right in.
So she goes over to see what flew through the window, and she sees it's a plane, and the plane's wing broke. So while she looks at it and picks it up, one of the kids, Jill, comes into the clubhouse by herself. I don't know if she was walking with Tony, going to the clubhouse or whatnot, but she should not be going in there unless, she's with either Tony or Vivian, just because, you don't know if there's a creature or somebody that's not supposed to be there that's in there. So
what if somebody just stumbled into that tree house or
clubhouse
and fell asleep, and then there's this little kid who just stumbles in or walks in, and then nope.
Yeah, and when you look at the intro, it's like these backyards, they're not like, there's no wooden fence, there's no like metal gate. It's like they're open backyards. So when she goes in, Vivian asks if that plane is hers, and so Jill says yeah, and unfortunately Vivian has to tell her that it broke. So, Jill, being a kid, when they see something broken, they lose faith in it. Yeah, Vivian shows Jill that just because it's broken doesn't mean that she should give up on it. And so they go over and they glue the wing back on. And Tony, Nicholas, and Alicia enter from the right side. But there's only one entrance, which is that, the tubey thing that they go through.
But, okay, so the entrance is on the left, our left, the viewer's left. And that's the tubey thing. But then from the right, there's no door. It's also
there's no entrance at all. There's only one entrance, and you see it in the intro where everyone rushes in through the tube, and they always leave through the tube. They never leave through any other way. So as they're fixing it, Tony and Alicia and Nicholas are all curious as to what they're doing, and so Vivian just explains that Jill's plane broke, so now they're fixing it. So they take the plane and they put it aside so that way it's not distracting anybody and it's able to dry off. And so, the kids are obviously bummed because they really wanted to play with Jill's plane. So Vivian said that they can still pretend to fly. And so Tony lifts one of the kids and have them fly.
Yeah, he lifted him up with his arms, and he was airlifted around. Wow. Tony just ran around the room, basically treating him like he was a little airplane.
Personally, I hated getting picked up. I would freak out because it's like I don't feel secure. So the kids have to be very trusting of Tony and Vivian in order for Tony to lift them up like that. With Tony lifting Nicholas up, that has Vivian prompt everyone to pretend to fly and sing a flying song.
It's music time!
So the first song in this episode is If I Could Fly.
If I could fly so high.
I love it. It really is one of my favorites in this season. It's so optimistic and it's carefree and it embodies that spirit of childhood innocence and dreaming that everything in the world is possible. Some kids dream of being firefighters, other kids dream of being dogs or airplanes. I don't know, I just really felt like the tone and everything in the song just really encapsulated that carefree, optimistic childhood innocence.
So when I heard the song,
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were gonna say, "If I can turn back time." I was like, "Oh, Cher's here. Okay, great." But and that's all I could think of. But then they kept singing, and I was singing it. The melody was stuck in my head.
Yeah, it's very engaging with the viewer, and I think it could easily fit into like the score of like a movie soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
like at the very beginning.
Yeah, no, it can. It definitely can.
Well, if you could fly, where would you go?
If I could fly.
If you
So
could turn back time and
if
fly.
I could turn back time. So if I could fly, I think I would go. I mean, if I could fly anywhere, I would go somewhere in Asia. I would love to go to Japan. I would love to go to India at some point, Africa. Those are some of the air places that I would fly to.
If I could fly so high, I
Yeah,
would go to Spain, because I feel like Spain is a beautiful culmination of so many different cultures, like Middle Eastern, African, and French, and just so many different influences. So after the song's done, Tony takes a seat because during the whole song, he's lifting all the children, flying them around. So Vivian gives Tony a hand by using this as an opportunity to do the arts and crafts with the kids.
It's arts and crafts time.
So the arts and crafts for this episode is, as we saw at the beginning, paper parachutes.
mm-hmm.
So they get paper cups, yarn, tissue, and tape. I think it's accessible. It can also be used as a way to teach science.
Yeah, gravity.
Because you know how there's a cup involved. The cup is what you tape all the ends of the string to, and then you tape the other end to the tissue paper. Pose the question of what would happen if you put a marble in there? What would happen if you put this in there?
Yeah.
So it does promote experimentation, making note of things like, oh, it felt faster because of this. And it also reminds me, remember those egg drops in school? When they gave you like an egg and you had to work with a group of people to make like a structure that would keep the egg from cracking.
I never did that.
So after they're done making them, because like they tape the four corners each with yarn, and then they put they take the other end of the yarn and tape it to the cup. Alicia suggests that they go over to the loft inside the clubhouse and try them out. The fact that she knows what a loft is.
I'm like, okay, Alicia, with the loft. Knowing what a loft.
You can tell that she lives in New York because they use the word loft. So they get to the top, Tony counts them off, and then they try them out. And they kind of work, but I don't know. I just think like the tissue paper was just a little too tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like a paper towel, but I think a paper towel might be a little too dense.
Yeah, I think the tissue paper was light enough.
But the cup was dragging it down.
Yeah, and think about it. If you were to use like a paper towel, it wouldn't have that same flowy effect in like creating that parachute look structure.
But what about a napkin then? Like the ones from the Mexican supermarkets.
The ones for like the quinceañeras.
Yeah, those ones.
Parties. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe that would be better, right? It's in between, right? It's not.
It's not too dense, but it's not like super tiny like a tissue paper.
Yeah.
It's a square.
That would be a good compromise trade-off for that.
So after they test them out, Tony lets the kids know that they actually have a real parachute in the clubhouse. So he gets it out and spreads it out. And they start playing with it, pulling it up and then watching it slowly fall down. I never did that when I was a little kid, like in Head Start. I was part of that Head Start program. And we'd go to the gymnasium and play all sorts of games. And I'd always see at the other end of the gymnasium, there was another group of kids that would be playing with the parachute. I'd be so mad, like distracted and jealous by the fact that they would play with it.
I luckily was fortunate enough to have that experience of playing with the parachute. And these things were massive, let me tell you. Like the parachutes that I played with, they could they could be used by the entire class, so 30 plus, and all of us would be around it, and then we'd have our own little spot to shake it the way the kids were shaking it and rattling it. And we would run under it. So kids would hide
Mm-hmm.
under it, and we'd like keep just flapping it around and then going up and down. So it was so much fun, like running under it and then going back out, finding our way out of that mess of the parachute mess. And then we would also throw like a little ball, a light ball on the top, and we'd uh, move the ball around with the as we flap the parachute. So that was something else that we did. But yeah, that was one of my favorite memories growing up in school during like recess or during break time in class, is that we would go out and play with that parachute thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So while they're playing with it, this brings to mind that Tony knows a song about parachutes.
It's music time.
So the parachute song, it's fun and repetitious and easy for any kid to repeat. It's also very like 50s rock.
Yes, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's 50s jive, like 50s rock, and then he's like, what does he say? Parachute high, real up in the sky. Parachute low, way in the valley below.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a catchy song. It was pretty cool. It was fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's always that issue of you either like one song or the other, and it's like there's never a competition of which is better. It's like one's always gonna overshadow the other. And unfortunately, even though the song's really catchy, If I Could Fly is just way better.
I mean, If I Could Fly won the Grammy, so I guess, right? There's no comparison to this 50s jive song that didn't even stand a chance when they paired
Mm-hmm.
it up with If I Can Fly.
Yeah,
But
but
nevertheless, I think it was a good one. It was a good song.
yeah.
It's different, you know. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think you can really compare the both of them, because they seem to be a little bit in different genres, in the sense that this one, it does sound like a 50s rock and roll song with the instruments that are used. And may I say the instruments are a little bit better in this song than in the
Mm-hmm.
other one.
Yeah.
So at least that I appreciated it for what it was, and the fact that it did sound different from the first song.
I think for a lot of little kids, 50s rock is very it's like their introduction to different genre of music.
Yeah.
Because like I remember learning about numbers, and like a lot of the time it would be like rock and roll type of music.
Mm-hmm.
I get it that it's something catchy and energized the kids, that viewers and kids would really be into. For their finale, they literally throw the parachute up and it swallows Alicia when it falls down. So
Well, did it land on her? I didn't even notice that.
it did. It landed on her. It landed on like over her head. They're all like celebrating because they're able to make this parachute fly, but they're still yearning to fly. And
Yep.
so Jill takes the lead, and she says, "Well, we can still pretend to fly," and she gets like this tulle scarf.
A pashmina?
Sure, yes, a pashmina.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, a pashmina is a
She-
scarf, but it's made out of Angoran
Yeah.
fabric.
This is tulle. She got something that was made out of tulle.
Yeah, synthetic. She got like a synthetic tulle or like a crinoline.
Yeah.
And so she's like, I'm a bird. And then Nicholas pulls out this swimming cap. And I'm just like, oh dear Lord, don't pull your hair putting this swim cap on. I remember being on the swim team, and my sister would have to wear one so that way she could swim faster. But I wanted to try it on one time. And I made the mistake of trying it on without wetting it or wetting my hair. And it like, the rubber cap like pulls your hair, and it's so like, and it was a swim cap. It wasn't like a pilot's cap or an aviator cap. It was a swim cap because it was blue, and you had like the strap underneath to strap it on the other end. And I'm just thinking the whole time, that must have hurt for the kids to put on.
Yeah.
And then Alicia gets like the most cartoony backwards propeller cap and pretends to be a plane. While they're playing around, grabbing costumes and still pretending to want to fly, Tony then asks, what would you suppose Peter Pan one day couldn't fly anymore?
It's story time.
And I like those times when they do that, because there are story times where they just get the idea of, hey, why don't we act out the story, but let's put in an octopus and a crab, or like a eagle and an airplane. But yeah. I love more when Tony and Vivian pose a question. Like, what would happen if Peter Pan wasn't able to fly anymore? What would happen if Cinderella couldn't find shoes to wear to the ball? While they're retelling the story of Peter Pan, I find it interesting that Alicia called out Tony's narration, pointing out that Peter Pan had a happy ending, because in the story, Peter Pan, played by Jill, gets dizzy from doing all these acrobatic maneuvers and is falling out of the sky. And Alicia's like, hey, I thought Peter Pan had a happy ending. And so Tony comes back to her, it could if someone helped her. So it's promoting participation, from the kids.
Yeah, for me, this was reminiscent, or at least reminding me of improv, and a situation where you don't know where the story's going to take you, how it's going to evolve, but it's really up to that actor and that kid in that place and time to decide, right? And create the story. So that was something really cool that I liked about this specific scene, is being able to see them use their imagination in that way, their creativity, their improv skills, right? Although, yes, probably scripted, of course, but it goes to remind children that act on a whim, or just be able to do things on the spot, act and create. So it shed that light to me, and I think that was pretty cool.
And when you talk about improv, there's a running theme of helping even if you might run into a problem, because first an eagle, played by Nicholas, helps Peter Pan by carrying Peter Pan on his back, but then Vivian adds, well, isn't Peter Pan heavy? Won't you get tired? And so that prompts Alicia, who's an airplane, to come in and rescue them. But then I think they pose the question of, well, what happens when you run out of gas? So I think it's an interesting running theme of, just asking those questions, because even though, this is, they're playing pretend, and they could easily just have a happy ending of, oh, and the eagle came and rescued him, and, everything was great, the end. It was great to pose this question. Well, what's going to happen when you've been flying for so long and Peter Pan is so heavy? What's going to happen after flying for so long? Aren't you going to run out of fuel? So I like that it's promoting questioning things.
It's preparing kids to be prepared. Be prepared for situations. Look ahead and think about scenarios.
Foreshadowing. It's developing foreshadowing. After they're done playing, Vivian checks on Jill's plane and she sees that the glue's dried. So Jill tests it out and it works. It might not work like how it used to, but it still flies through the air.
I thought that the moment Jill threw that plane, I'm like, oh, there it is. It's going to get broken again. She just threw it so hard. And it just went crashing down, but it didn't break. So, yeah, I think it was really cool to see a problem and then a solution at the end.
So after they're done playing and stuff, and, Jill thanks Vivian, Tony has to tell the kids it's time to fly home, and the kids all stop, and they stare, and they give him this look of, girl, really, girl? You cannot be serious,
what?
Girl.
No, you didn't. I'm not going to go home right now.
No, girl. I'm gonna live in this clubhouse.
It's only been 20 minutes. Why are we going home?
It looks like 20 minutes, but there's actually...
it's been much more. It's been much longer than that, because they've had...
Yeah, because there's episodes where they do arts and crafts. You saw this one. And you saw the Camp Out Kids. And the Camp Out Kids, they weren't wearing these oversized shirts, yeah? But in this episode, they had oversized shirts on as smocks.
Which can we talk about how cool those are? I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Like
It
these
is. It's practical, and it's something like that's so. Yeah, it's practical and it's cheap. You can go to like the Goodwill, get an oversized shirt, wash it, and then you can have your kids use it as a smock, and it covers up their whole entire upper body and most of their lower body.
So these are all like single colored shirts. They're like one color. They're all bright colors that they were
They're
using.
probably Tony shirts.
Yeah, it seems like they were Tony
when
shirts.
he was in his husky years.
Tony wasn't wearing one because he was wearing it his properly, I guess. But you know what? Like, what was the purpose of wearing smocks for this episode? Because
that's what I was thinking too. Because it's like you're not really putting on. You're not using glue. You're not using anything like that. But in the Camp Out Kid, they don't wear those smocks. But in this episode, they wear the smocks. And so from the time that they walk from their music segment to the arts and crafts segment, there has to have been some time that's elapsed in order for them to have put on those oversized shirts.
Yeah.
So even though people say, oh, it's 22 minutes, or it's like, I guess in that universe, it's like probably been like an hour and a half, 2 hours, because, you know, they gotta set up things and, you know, take them down. So it's like, it looks like 20 minutes, but, you know, we're probably time skipping. Mm-hmm. Tony takes them home, and Vivian takes that time to share that she still dreams of flying and how easy it is to, you know, make parachutes. And I think that's very admirable that she still has these, you know, jovial dreams of wanting to fly. Some people, you know, have those dreams and they're too afraid to admit them. But, you know, it's very admirable that she's able to share, even if it's in the script, for her character to share, you know, sometimes I still dream of wanting to fly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was High Flyers. So before we get to our final verdict, let's give a few thoughts on the actors. Yes, I'll say a name and you give me your thoughts on their acting. So let's start with the good old Tony.
Tony, I find him believable. I think he's great. He's enthusiastic with the kids.
I wrote he was active, but he was sidelined for most of the activities. So he was active, but he wasn't like part of the group doing things. I'd say it was more Vivian that was part of most of those activities going on, like the parachutes. He just sat there and watched everybody else.
Yeah. Well, Vivian was the one who had the time in the clubhouse and had already created the parachutes, the paper people.
All right, then let's talk about Vivian then, since we're already talking about her.
I mean, I think Vivian was the star of this show. She was cutting them purple paper people like no other. I liked how in the beginning, you know, so maybe not her, but like, I like how they kind of give you an outline of what they're going to do. And then in the end, she summarizes what happened, and she kind of says, hey, you know, remember, it's easy to make these parachutes. All you need is paper, string, cups, and you're good, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think she did a great job in taking a lead in this episode and really giving these kids the experience. So
I wrote that she's very energized and active, and normally she is the lead because it is her backyard that the clubhouse is in. But when calling back to Camp Out Kids, she was not on her A game that day. It was actually Tony that was kind of leading that episode. All right, then let's go ahead and move on to the kids. What do you think of Jill?
Jill was probably my, Jill is a little bit of an overactor. You know, she's a kid. I get it, but I thought she did well. I think she did okay. She had most of the lines in this episode. I think, given that she was the one with the problem, she's the one that encountered Vivian first with the broken plane, and so she had a few more lines there. But I think she presented herself well, and she was good. Yeah.
I thought in this episode specifically, she was very bright and lively. Normally, she's like a little more meek, a little more mousy. But this episode, she was just very bright and lively. Mm-hmm. What about Nicholas?
Nicholas? I felt Nicholas was the one who was acting like himself the most, if that makes sense. Like he was just, it felt like he wasn't even acting, like he was just there having fun. He was like, hey, my mom told me to sign up for the show, so I'm just gonna come and do things with these kids and play around. So I felt like, you know, his screen time was the most natural, and like how enthusiastic he was when he was creating the parachute, to like even the storytelling and things like that.
I wrote that he has lots of energy, and I will reiterate this from my other episodes. He's just very wide eyed with everything. It's like everything excites him, and he's very wide eyed and open to doing things, even open to looking silly. Because there are some episodes where he acts a fool, looking like a crab, or like plugging his nose and then making a honking noise. That sounds like he needs a respirator. And lastly, Alicia.
I mean, I think Alicia was great. She's very lovable. Um, she has, you know, that good sense, and that she was the one questioning Tony about why the story was and not ending in the happy note the way the Peter Pan story is supposed to. So I think she's admitted, you know, just happiness, joyful, but also showed a little bit of street smarts that she has. So yeah.
I read that she is sassy yet mindful. Sassy in the instances of how she called out Tony, like you said, of like, hey, I thought Peter Pan had a happy ending. But she was also mindful of, like, when they made the parachutes, like, hey, let's go up to the loft and drop them from there, because she knew that the loft was really high up. So she's very mindful, she's very observant. All right, then, let's go ahead and get to the final verdict then. All right, then, so the theme. Do you think the theme of flying is something that would spark interest in kids today?
Of course. I think that is a theme that will never lose interest to kids, because they look up at the sky, and as kids, you're so small, and you look up and you see things in the sky. How does that happen? I wish I can do that. I wish I can get from point A to B just by flapping my wings or going up in the sky like that. So yes, I think this is one of those themes that will hold up for a very, 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 very long time.
I feel like it's very timeless because, you know, just kids are just naturally curious, and so just seeing something just float in the air, it's like they want to do that, and, you know, regardless of if it's possible or not, you know, they just have that dream. Every kid has that dream of wanting to fly. People still have that dream of wanting to fly. So it is very timeless. That can still spark the interest of people of many different age ranges. All right, then, what about the music? How did you feel the music held up? Do you think it'll still, you know, get kids to jam along, or do you think they'll be like, this is boring?
I think based on the catchy tunes they had, and the fun lyrics, I think it would get children of that age bracket interested, and have them singing along. I mean, it had me singing along with "If I Could Fly So High."
If I could turn back time.
Which I still think sounds like Cher's song, but yeah, I think those two songs that I remember from the beginning of the episode, not beginning, but the parachute song and the flying high song, are both songs that are catchy and can stand time. So
Okay. I feel that as much as I love If I Could Fly, I don't think it's too long for the age range that it's supposed to be for, which is preschool. I think it's just too long because it's 2 minutes, and by that point,
it's 2 minutes.
It's a 2 minute song, and it's just so mellow, but it's like kids want stuff that's energized, you know, like with lots of energy, or like lots of instruments. Okay. And it's like, I just feel like as much as I love If I Could Fly, I don't think it would hold a kid's attention as much as I really wish it could. But the parachute song definitely would get a kid's attention, especially with how it's like it gives you a chance to sing along, where it's like parachute high up in the sky, parachute down to the valley below.
Parachute low in the valley below.
Exactly. It gives you a chance. It gives the viewer the chance to sing along because it's repetitious and it's more lively and upbeat. So I still think the music, even though I'm split on it, I still think it still holds up, but it depends on the child.
I guess we'll have to wait for the producers to make a EDM electronic dance music mix of that first song, and then it'll be a hit.
All right, then. So the arts and crafts. Do you think it's still something that's accessible to kids, or do you feel like the materials or the steps are just too like outdated?
Mm-hmm. I think the materials are easily accessible: tissue, yarn, cups. That's okay. That's all stuff that I have in my home right now. So I think, yes, definitely easily accessible.
Yeah, it's definitely practical. You can find most of that stuff at the dollar store, most of that stuff at like the grocery
Yeah,
store.
and the parachute, you can actually get like a sabana. You can get
Yeah, even with the parachute experience that they had, you can just get like a bed sheet and spread it out.
yeah.
So yeah, even the parachute activity is very accessible. So yes, it does hold up. The story.
I think it'll catch them or draw them in with the use of Peter Pan, and then keep them engaged with not knowing what's next, right? Because turns out it's not the story you were expecting. So
There's no Wendy.
it's gonna
There's
keep
no
them
Captain
curious.
Hook.
It's gonna keep them guessing, and coming up with their own ideas about what's gonna happen. So yeah.
It had a plot. It had a problem. It had a climax. And ultimately it did have a solution. So it's like it's great, and it's a great introduction to stories that have climaxes. A great way to introduce a climax to a child. Like, will they crash land, or will they land safely? So I'd say it's still definitely a very interesting take on a story of Peter Pan, and it still holds up. It's a modern interpretation, definitely. And lastly, the overall acting of everyone. Is it something like outdated, like very 90s in how they act, or do you think people still act like this, and so kids would be like, oh, he's just like me?
The acting is a little, it's that 90s acting. It's very over the top. It's cheesy. I don't know whether, I think children at the time now maybe can see and read right through it. But I'm not around children long enough to know what their interests are now and what they're drawn to. I know right now we have a lot of different material available for kids. They have internet, they have Wi-Fi, they have Wi-Fi internet, duh, but they have access to all these videos online, YouTube. So I think the average preschooler is much more, it's exposed to much more than the preschooler back in, what is it,
98,
1990.
99.
So I don't think the acting would hold up in this day and era, in this time, because of what our current day preschoolers are exposed to at such a young age.
Yeah, I'd say, even though it has a special place in my heart, the acting it is of the style of 90s, where it's like, you add such an optimistic exclamation point to everything, and it's like so wondrous and it's so mysterious. But now it's like people are basically shouting at a camera, and little kids are excited by that versus like the wonder and mystery and excitement of something. They're not drawn to that anymore because they can just look it up, or they can ask their parents, and their parents can look it up for them. Kids respond more to shouting and yelling, like, oh my god, this is so exciting, and blah blah blah. And it's like, unfortunately, they're more drawn to that now. You know, it's very of its time, but I still feel like it holds up to a younger demographic. I'd say not to like preschoolers, but I'd still say it holds up to a younger demographic because you're like, you know, making things mysterious and exciting for them, and they, you know, the world is their oyster, and they don't know what's, you know, what, you know, they're still exploring it. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it doesn't hold up for, I'd say, a lot of preschoolers, but there are, you know, still children younger than that would find an interest in this. So, overall, High Flyers still holds up. So before we go, Juan, is there any last thought?
Just thank you for having me on board. I forever will sing If I Can Fly So High.
Make sure to leave a comment if you like what you hear. Why not subscribe? I put out new episodes Saturday on SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, and on my YouTube channel. Send me an email. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me what I can improve on, because it takes a village to raise something beautiful. In the words of Tony and Vivian, so long, farewell, until we meet again.
Let's all pretend to fly. Come on, let's fly way up in the clouds. Fly, everybody.
If I could fly, it will be so cool. I never ever have to take a bus to school. I would zoom